The marble floor felt like ice against Becca's cheek. Cold, unforgiving, final. She'd known she would fall eventually. 3 hours of standing on broken ribs while accusations rained down like silver bullets would break anyone. But she'd wanted to make it to the verdict. Wanted to hear them say the words that would end her life with some shred of dignity intact. Instead, she crumpled like a rag doll in front of 300 wolves who'd already decided she deserved to die. Pathetic, someone muttered from the gallery. Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and casual, the sound of people watching an insect squirm beneath a boot. Becca's vision blurred. The vaulted ceiling of the pack court swam above her, all ancient stone and banners bearing the sigils of families that had ruled for centuries. Families that had never included hers. Families that had decided 3 hours ago, maybe 3 years ago, that she was disposable. Her wolf was silent, had been silent since the rejection 2 days ago when Dante, her mate, had looked at her with those beautiful amber eyes and said the words that severed their bond like a blade through silk. I, Dante Ashcroft, reject you, Becca Locke, as my mate and Luna. The pain had been exquisite, like every bone in her body breaking at once, every nerve ending set on fire. She'd collapsed then, too, in the privacy of his chambers, thinking that at least the humiliation would be contained. She'd been wrong. Dante had announced the rejection at the pack assembly the next morning, standing tall and righteous, explaining that his seer had shown him a vision of darkness and betrayal. A vision of Becca standing over the bodies of slaughtered pack members, her hands dripping with blood. Lies. All of it lies. But the seer was Dante's aunt, and her word was law. And Becca was just the orphan Omega who'd somehow caught an alpha's eye. No one believed her denials. No one even listened. The cold crept up her arms. Becca tried to push herself up, but her body refused to obey. Somewhere above her collapsing form, she heard Dante's voice, smooth and regretful. The perfect performance of a leader making hard choices. As you can see, the accused can barely stand under the weight of her crimes. The goddess herself withdraws her blessing. No, Becca wanted to scream. I'm bleeding internally because your guards beat me last night. Because Iris paid them to make sure I couldn't speak clearly during the trial. Iris, Dante's childhood friend. The she-wolf who'd made it very clear from the moment the mate bond snapped into place that Becca was a temporary inconvenience. That someone like her could never truly be Luna. Turned out, Iris had been right. Please, Becca managed, the words scraping her throat raw. Please, I didn't… Silence. Elder Rowan's voice boomed through the chamber, cutting her off. The evidence is clear. 3 pack members dead, poisoned by wolfsbane-laced wine served at the Luna ceremony that never was. One that you, Becca Locke, prepared with your own hands. I never… Becca coughed, tasting copper. Blood. She'd bitten through her tongue when she fell. Witnesses placed you in the kitchens that night, Elder Rowan continued, his white beard trembling with manufactured grief. Alone, unsupervised, with full access to the wine stores. Because Iris had sent the other kitchen staff away, had told Becca the Alpha wanted her to personally oversee the preparations, as a test of her worthiness to be Luna. Becca had been so desperate to prove herself, so eager to belong, that she'd walked right into the trap. The gallery murmured, a low rumble of agreement and disgust. Becca's eyes found Iris in the crowd. The she-wolf sat beside Dante, her hand resting possessively on his arm, her face a perfect mask of sorrow. But when their eyes met, Iris smiled. It was a tiny thing, a ghost of expression that no one else would catch. But Becca saw it, felt it. That smile said, I won. I've always been winning. And you were too stupid to stop me. Then the darkness came rushing up like a riptide, pulling Becca under. But the cold marble never touched her face again. Instead, heat. Massive arms slid beneath her before unconsciousness could claim her completely, lifting her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against a chest that radiated power so ancient It made her dying wolf whimper in recognition. The scent hit her broken senses. Cedar, smoke, and winter storms. Something wild and untamed that cut through the pain like lightning through clouds. And something inside her that had been screaming for hours, screaming since Dante severed their bond, suddenly went quiet. The new bond snapped into place like a bone setting, like a dislocated joint sliding back where it belonged. Mate. No. Impossible. She'd just been rejected. Bonds didn't form that fast, didn't heal that quickly. She had no right to. Who? The voice above her head didn't ask. It commanded. Did this. The words cut through the packed court like an execution order, and every wolf in the room felt their throats close in instinctive submission. Even through her blurred vision, Becca saw Elder Rowan's face drain of color, saw Dante's eyes go wide with shock, saw Iris's perfect composure crack at the edges. Because the man holding her, the man whose arms felt like safety incarnate, was Zeus Thorn, the exiled Alpha King. The wolf who'd been banished from these territories 5 years ago for crimes no one dared speak of. The legend who'd supposedly gone rogue, living like a ghost in the wildlands where civilization ended and monsters began. He wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't allowed to be here, but he'd come anyway. And now his silver eyes, wolf eyes, burning with barely controlled fury, swept across the assembled court with the weight of a death sentence. Before we continue, quick question. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. I love seeing where my pack is scattered across the globe. And please, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. You're about to go on a journey with a girl who's been betrayed by everyone she trusted, and an exiled king who's about to remind this court why they feared him in the first place. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of what's coming. All right, let's dive in. Because this trial, it was never about justice. It was about control. The trial had started at dawn. Becca had been dragged from her cell in the pack dungeons, a place she'd never imagined she'd see from the inside, and hauled before the pack court while the morning mist still clung to the ground. 300 wolves filled the circular chamber, their eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight, despite the sun rising outside. The ancient hall had been carved from the mountain itself, all rough stone and shadows, a place where pack law had been written in blood for over 1,000 years. Becca stood in the center of the circle, her wrists bound with silver-laced rope that burned her skin with every heartbeat. She was still wearing the white dress from 2 nights ago, the dress she'd put on thinking she'd be celebrating her mating ceremony with Dante. Now it was torn and stained with blood. Her blood. From the beating Iris's guards had given her to keep her docile during the trial. "Let the record show!" Elder Rowan's voice boomed from the high seat, his walking stick striking the stone floor like a gavel. "That Becca Locke stands accused of conspiracy to commit murder, the poisoning of 3 pack members, and high treason against Alpha Dante Ashcroft." Treason. The word was a knife between her ribs. She'd loved Dante, had believed the goddess herself had blessed their bond, had spent 3 beautiful months falling asleep in his arms, thinking she'd finally found the family she'd lost when her parents died in a rogue attack 10 years ago. She'd been 21 years old, and finally, not alone. Then the vision came. Dante's aunt, Seer Morgana, had burst into their chambers 3 days ago, her eyes wild with prophetic fury, screaming about blood and betrayal. About Becca standing over Dante's corpse, a blade in her hands, darkness consuming the pack. Becca had tried to explain that she'd never hurt Dante, never hurt anyone. But Morgana's visions were sacred law in the Silver Pine Pack. If the seer said it would happen, then it would happen, unless they stopped it first. The rejection had come that night, the arrest the next morning, the trial at dawn. And through it all, Iris had been there, whispering poison in Dante's ear, her hand always on his arm, her eyes always finding Becca's with that victorious gleam. The accused will now hear testimony from the primary witness, Elder Rowan continued. Iris Volkov, Beta's daughter. Please approach. Becca's stomach twisted. Iris rose from her seat like a queen ascending a throne. She wore mourning colors, deep purple and black, and her dark hair fell in perfect waves around a face that could have been carved by an artist. Beautiful, delicate, everything an alpha's mate should be. Everything Becca wasn't. When Iris reached the center of the chamber, she turned to face Becca, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. The smile that curved her lips was pure venom. I wish I could say I'm surprised, Iris began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. But Becca has always been unstable, jealous, obsessive. Lies. All lies. From the moment Dante's bond snapped into place with her, Iris continued, I tried to welcome her, tried to help her adjust to pack life. But she saw enemies everywhere, accused me of trying to steal him away. Iris's voice broke beautifully. I was just trying to be her friend. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Wolves leaned forward, drinking in every word. Becca's throat closed. She wanted to scream, to rage, to tear apart the lies with truth. But her ribs ached with every breath, and the silver burned her wrists. And her wolf was still silent, broken by the rejection. The night of the incident, Iris pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I found Becca in the kitchens, alone. She was adding something to the ceremonial wine. When I asked what she was doing, she told me to mind my business. Tears spilled down Iris's perfect face. I should have stopped her, should have known. 3 wolves are dead because I didn't act. You're lying, Becca managed, her voice hoarse. You sent the other staff away. You told me. Order! Elder Rowan's stick cracked against stone. The accused will remain silent unless directly questioned. Becca's jaw snapped shut, her wolf's instinct to submit, overpowering her need to defend herself. Iris turned to the elders, her tears glittering like diamonds. I believe Becca poisoned the wine because she knew Dante was having doubts about the bond. She wanted to eliminate anyone who might convince him to reject her, including... Iris's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. Including me. The chamber erupted in outrage, wolves shouting, demanding justice, calling for Becca's execution. Through it all, Dante sat frozen in his seat, his face carefully blank. The mate bond was gone, severed by his own words, but Becca could still read him, could still see the doubt flickering in his eyes. He wanted to believe her. Some small part of him knew this didn't make sense. But Morgana's vision, Iris's tears, the dead pack members, it was too much evidence against her. And Becca was just the orphan Omega who'd gotten lucky for 3 months. Does the accused wish to speak? Elder Rowan asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather she didn't. Becca opened her mouth. The room tilted violently. Her vision swam. The beating last night had done more damage than she'd realized. She could feel something broken inside her, something vital giving way. She managed. Her knees buckled, the silver rope cut deeper as she tried to catch herself. But there was nothing to grab, nothing to stop the fall. The cold floor rushed up to meet her, and she thought, this is how it ends. Not with justice, not with truth, with me broken on the ground while she watches and smiles. But the floor never came. Instead, heat. Arms like iron bands caught her mid-fall, pulling her against a chest that radiated warmth like a furnace. The scent overwhelmed everything. Cedar, smoke, winter storms. And her dying wolf suddenly screamed back to life. Mate! The bond blazed into existence, a golden thread connecting her shattered heart to something vast and ancient and absolutely deadly. Becca forced her eyes open. Zeus Thorn stared down at her. She'd heard stories about the exiled Alpha King. Every wolf in the territories had. He'd ruled the northern packs with absolute authority until 5 years ago, when he'd been accused of murdering his beta in cold blood. The evidence had been overwhelming. Witnesses, blood, a confession extracted under duress. Zeus had been given a choice: execution or exile. He'd chosen exile, walking into the wildlands alone, and no one had seen him since. Until now. He looked nothing like the polished alphas in the court. His black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and unkempt. His face was all hard angles and scars. A map of violence survived. He wore leather and furs like a barbarian king, and his eyes, gods, his eyes were pure molten silver, burning with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Who?" he said softly, his voice a rumble that vibrated through her entire body. "Put these marks on you." The chamber had fallen into suffocating silence. Becca's lips parted, but no sound came out. How did he know? How could he see? His hand moved, gentle despite its size, pushing back the torn sleeve of her white dress to reveal the bruises mottling her arm, black and purple finger marks. Then his gaze dropped lower, tracking the way she held herself, the slight hitch in her breathing, the blood seeping through the fabric at her ribs. Who did this? Not a question, a command that made every wolf in the room lower their eyes in submission. Except 3, Elder Rowan, whose face had gone sheet white, Dante, whose amber eyes had gone wide with something that might have been regret, and Iris, whose perfect composure finally shattered completely. Zeus's gaze found her slowly, deliberately, and Becca felt the bond between them pulse with something dark and furious. "The trial," Zeus said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber, "is over." Zeus didn't ask permission. He lifted Becca into his arms as though she were made of glass and fury, cradling her against his chest with a possessiveness that sent shockwaves through the chamber. Every wolf felt it, the primal claim, the bond snapping into place like a thunderclap that left the air vibrating with power. "My mate," Zeus said simply, the words falling like an execution order. "You put your hands on my mate." Becca's world tilted, but this time not from pain. Mate. The word echoed in her mind, impossible, terrifying, and somehow right in a way that nothing in her life had ever been. She'd spent 3 months believing Dante was her fated mate, had endured the rejection, thinking she'd never feel that bond again. But this was different, stronger, like comparing a candle flame to a wildfire. "Your Majesty," Elder Rowan stammered, his earlier authority crumbling like wet parchment. "You were exiled. You have no authority here. The girl is accused of murder and—" "Are you suggesting," Zeus interrupted, his voice soft and deadly, "that I don't recognize my own mate bond?" Silence. Elder Rowan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Becca forced herself to focus through the haze of pain and shock. She needed to understand what was happening, needed to see the faces of the wolves who'd condemned her now, that their perfect narrative had shattered. Dante sat frozen, his face ashen. For the first time in 3 days, Becca saw genuine emotion in his eyes. Not love, that was gone, severed by his own words, but guilt, horror at what he'd almost done. And Iris. Iris looked like she might be sick. Her blue eyes darted between Becca and Zeus, her mind clearly racing to salvage the situation. But there was no salvaging this, no pretty lie that could explain away a mate bond recognized by Zeus Thorn, the most powerful alpha to ever rule these territories. "I can explain," Iris started, her voice no longer trembling with fake emotion, but with genuine panic. "You will be silent," Zeus commanded, and Iris's jaw snapped shut mid-word, her wolf forced into submission by the sheer dominance rolling off him in waves. He turned his attention back to Becca, and his expression softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Can you speak?" he asked quietly, for her ears alone. Becca nodded, though even. That small movement sent pain lancing through her skull. "Yes," she whispered, her voice wrecked from hours of holding back screams. "Tell me your name." "Becca. Becca Locke." Something flickered in his silver eyes. Recognition? No. Knowledge. Like the name confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Becca," he repeated, and the way he said it, like a prayer, like a promise, made her want to cry. "I need you to answer one question, and I need the truth." His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away blood she hadn't realized was there. "Have you been harmed by anyone in this chamber?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Becca's gaze found Iris. Her rival stood trembling now, all pretense of innocence stripped away, replaced by raw fear. For 3 months, Iris had held all the power. The Alpha's best friend, the Beta's daughter, the she-wolf everyone expected Dante to choose. She'd wielded that power like a weapon, cutting Becca down piece by piece, always in the shadows, always careful to leave no witnesses. But now, the shadows had light. "Yes," Becca said, her voice stronger now. "Last night, guards came to my cell. They beat me, broke my ribs, told me that if I spoke during the trial, they'd make my death slow and painful." Gasps erupted throughout the chamber. "They said," Becca continued, her eyes never leaving Iris's face, "that Iris Volkov had paid them, that she'd promised them positions of honor in the pack once I was executed and she became Luna." "That's a lie!" Iris shrieked, but her voice shook. "Show them," Zeus commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Becca hesitated. The marks beneath her dress weren't just evidence. They were shame, humiliation, proof of how powerless she'd been to stop her own torture. But Zeus's arms tightened around her, protective and patient. "You're safe now," he murmured. "No one will touch you again. I swear it on my life." And Becca believed him. With trembling fingers, she pulled aside the neckline of her dress, revealing the ring of bruises around her collarbone. Boot prints, clear as day. Then she shifted slightly, wincing, to show the mottled purple spreading across her ribs. "Last night," she said quietly, "Iris came to the dungeons personally. She watched them beat me. She told me I should have known my place, that someone like me could never be Luna." Becca's voice hardened. "She told me she'd already won, that Dante would be hers the moment I was dead." The chamber erupted into chaos, wolves shouting, elders demanding order, pack members surging to their feet in confusion and rage. But Zeus simply held Becca closer, his eyes locked on Iris with the cold promise of vengeance. "You tortured my mate," he said softly. "You framed her for murder. You stood in this court and performed your innocence while she bled." Iris backed away, her hands raised. "I didn't know. I never thought. She's just an Omega. I didn't realize that she was... that you..." "That changes nothing." Zeus's smile was a predator's grin. "You tortured an innocent. You conspired to commit judicial murder. And for that, Iris Volkov, you will answer to me." The guards came for Iris within seconds. Not Dante's guards, Zeus's. Warriors who'd followed their king into exile and back, whose loyalty had been forged in blood and battle. They flanked Iris before she could take another step, their hands closing around her arms with iron grips. "No!" Iris shrieked, her composure finally shattering completely. "Dante! Dante, do something!" Dante stood, trapped between the she-wolf he'd known all his life and his survival instinct. Becca watched the calculation flash across his face. Defend Iris and make an enemy of Zeus Thorn, or sacrifice her and possibly save himself. He chose himself. "Your Majesty," Dante said carefully, lowering his eyes in submission. "If Iris has committed crimes, she must face justice. I will not interfere with your authority." Iris's face went white. "You coward." One of the guards clamped a hand over her mouth, silencing her mid-scream. Zeus's attention shifted to Elder Rowan. "You presided over this mockery of a trial. Tell me, Did you investigate the accusations against Becca Locke? Or did you simply accept the word of a seer who happens to be the Alpha's aunt? Rowan's white beard trembled. We followed proper protocol. Witnesses were questioned. Evidence was… What evidence? Zeus's voice cracked like a whip. Testimony from a rival. Accusations without proof. Where is the wolfsbane that supposedly poisoned the wine? Where are the 3 bodies? Where is any physical evidence? Silence. I thought so. Zeus turned his gaze on the entire assembly, and Becca felt his power roll through the chamber like thunder before a storm. This trial was a stage play with a predetermined ending, execution. And you all sat here complicit, watching an innocent woman be condemned because she had the misfortune of standing between an Alpha's childhood friend and power. Shame rippled through the gallery. Wolves who'd been ready to watch her die now couldn't meet her eyes. The trial is over, Zeus declared. Becca Locke is absolved of all charges. Furthermore, she is under my personal protection as my mate. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or even looks at her with ill intent will answer to me directly. Is that understood? A chorus of, "Yes, Your Majesty," echoed through the chamber. Becca's mind reeled. Mate. Protected. Absolved. The words felt like they belonged to someone else's story, not hers. She'd walked into this chamber expecting to die. Instead, she was being held by a king who'd just upended the entire pack hierarchy to defend her. As for you, Zeus continued, his gaze locking on Iris, you will be held pending a full investigation into the false accusations against my mate, conspiracy to commit murder, and bribery of pack guards. If you're found guilty, his smile turned cold, you'll discover that I'm far less merciful than the elders you manipulated. Iris thrashed against the guard's grip, her eyes wild with desperation. She's lying. Becca has always been jealous, always trying to… Take her, Zeus commanded. The guards dragged Iris toward the chamber's rear exit. Her screams echoed off the stone walls, growing fainter as they hauled her into the darkness below the court. Becca watched her rival disappear and felt… nothing. No triumph, no relief, just a hollow exhaustion that went bone deep. You're trembling, Zeus murmured, his attention back on her completely. Becca realized he was right. Her entire body shook like a leaf in a storm, adrenaline and shock finally catching up to her, now that the immediate danger had passed. I need to get you out of here, he said, more to himself than to her. Then louder, addressing the chamber. This court is dismissed. Alpha Dante, you will remain. We have much to discuss about how you allowed this to happen under your authority. Dante's face drained of what little color remained. But Becca barely registered it. The room had started to spin again, her vision tunneling as her body finally gave up the fight to stay conscious. She'd been running on terror and desperation for so long that now, held safe in Zeus's arms, her mind simply let go. Becca, Zeus's voice sharpened with concern. Stay with me. Don't… The darkness pulled her under like a riptide. She woke to softness. That was the first shock, the feeling of fur against her skin instead of cold stone or rough straw. The second shock was the absence of pain. Not completely gone, but muted, as though someone had wrapped her wounds in clouds. Becca's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a tent larger than the packhouse common room. Rich fabrics hung from the ceiling in deep reds and golds. Furs covered the floor. A fire crackled in a copper brazier, filling the space with warmth and the scent of cedar smoke. This wasn't the palace. This was something else. Somewhere wild. You're awake. She turned her head slowly, carefully, to find Zeus sitting in a carved wooden chair beside the bed. He'd removed his leather jacket, leaving him in a simple black shirt that did nothing to hide the raw power of his frame. His silver eyes tracked her every movement with an intensity that should have frightened her. Instead, she felt safe. Where am I? Her voice came out rough. "My camp. In the borderlands." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The healers attended to you while you slept. They've treated your wounds and given you something for the pain." Becca took inventory. Her ribs still ached, but the sharp stabbing sensation was gone. The bruises on her arms felt less like they were on fire. Even her head had stopped pounding. "Better," she admitted. Then, because she needed to know, "Why did you help me? You don't know me." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "I know you're my mate," he said simply. "I know you survived 3 months with a male who didn't deserve you, and still had the courage to stand in that chamber and speak truth. I know you're stronger than you realize." He paused. "And I know that whoever taught you that you weren't enough was a liar." Tears burned behind Becca's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I was rejected," she whispered. "2 days ago. Dante severed our bond. How can I possibly be your mate?" Zeus stood and moved to the bed's edge, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "The mate bond doesn't ask permission, Becca. It doesn't care about rejections, or broken hearts, or pack politics. It simply is." His hand reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, gentle as a whisper, and the bond between them flared to life. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, impossible to deny. "You feel it, don't you?" he said softly. Becca nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Then that's all that matters." His thumb traced her jawline. "You're mine now, under my protection. And I promise you, Becca Locke, no one will hurt you again." She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the safety he offered. But 3 months with Dante had taught her that promises were just words, and words could be broken. "You were exiled," she said quietly, "for murder. Everyone says I killed my beta. In cold blood," Zeus finished, his voice hardening. "That I snapped during a territorial dispute and tore out his throat like a rabid animal." Becca's breath caught. "Did you?" No. The word was absolute. But the evidence said otherwise. Witnesses, blood, a confession extracted while I was drugged with silver and nightshade. His jaw clenched. Someone wanted me gone, wanted my territory. So they framed me with a crime so heinous, the elders had no choice but to exile me, or execute me. Who? Zeus's smile was cold. That's what I've spent 5 years discovering. And now, finally, I have proof. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather journal, old and worn. Stan Volkov's personal records. Iris's father. The beta who supposedly died by my hand. Becca's heart stopped. He's alive? Very much so. Living comfortably in the Western Territories under a new name, enjoying the wealth he stole from my vaults. Zeus's eyes blazed with fury. He faked his death, framed me for murder, and seized control of half my former territory while I rotted in exile. And Iris? Knew everything. She was 16 when it happened, old enough to understand what her father was doing. Zeus set the journal on the bedside table. When I heard about your trial, heard that Stan's daughter was the primary witness against an Omega accused of poisoning pack members. He trailed off. The pattern was too familiar, so I came. Becca stared at him. You risked everything. Coming back to the territories could have gotten you killed. And you did it for someone you'd never met? I did it because the mate bond was already forming, Zeus said quietly. I felt you, Becca. Felt your pain from hundreds of miles away. Felt the moment Dante rejected you like a knife to my chest. His hand cupped her face. And I knew, somehow, that you were mine to protect. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Becca had spent 3 months believing Dante was her salvation, had endured the rejection, thinking she'd lost everything. But Zeus had felt her pain and come running, had abandoned his exile, risked his life, upended an entire pack court to save her. "I don't understand," she choked out. "Why me? I'm just an Omega. I have nothing to offer you." "You're not just anything," Zeus said fiercely. "You're my mate, my equal, and you're about to discover that being the mate of an exiled king comes with certain advantages." The next 3 days passed in a blur of impossibilities. Becca woke each morning in furs that smelled like cedar and storms, ate meals prepared by healers who treated her like something precious, and walked through Zeus's camp without feeling the weight of judgment on her shoulders. The Borderlands camp was nothing like the Silver Pine Packhouse. No rigid hierarchy, no sneering looks from wolves who thought she didn't belong. Zeus's followers, and there were over 200 of them, treated her with respect bordering on reverence. "You're the king's mate," a warrior named Petra explained when Becca asked why everyone kept bowing to her. "That makes you our queen, even in exile." Queen. The word was absurd. But the healers visited twice daily, their gentle hands replacing Iris's cruelty with something Becca had almost forgotten existed: kindness. And Zeus was there for all of it, not hovering, but present, teaching her about the camp, introducing her to his most trusted warriors, showing her the life he'd built in exile. It was freedom, it was safety, it was terrifying. Because Becca was learning that freedom came with complications. You can't just hide her away forever. The voice drifted through the tent walls one evening, female and sharp, and utterly unafraid of the exiled king. Becca pressed herself against the fabric, her heart hammering. She'd been looking for Zeus when she'd heard voices from his strategy tent. "The packs are already talking," the woman continued. "An Omega mate. Half of them think it's a political move. The other half think you've lost your mind." "What the packs think," Zeus's low rumble replied, "is irrelevant." "Is it?" Footsteps paced. "You've ruled from exile for 5 years by being strategic, Zeus. This isn't strategic. This is reckless. You claimed a girl you'd never met, defied the pack court without evidence, and exposed yourself to your enemies. They're circling." "Let them circle," Zeus said. "Anyone who thinks my mate makes me weak will learn otherwise." A pause. "I'm not saying reject her. I'm saying prepare her. If she's going to survive in this world, in your world, she needs to be more than a victim you rescued. She needs to be a warrior." Becca's stomach twisted. She was the weakness. The Omega girl who'd somehow become the exiled king's mate and threatened everything he'd built. "I know," Zeus said quietly, and Becca heard something in his voice she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. "I'm trying to give her time to heal first." Time is a luxury you don't have. Stan Volkov knows you're back in the territories. He knows about your mate. And he'll use her to destroy you if she's not ready. Footsteps approached the tent entrance. Becca stumbled backward just as the flap opened, revealing Zeus and a striking woman with silver-streaked auburn hair and eyes like chips of amber. The woman's gaze landed on Becca, assessment flickering across her features. "How much did you hear?" Zeus asked, his expression unreadable. Becca lifted her chin, refusing to cower. "Enough to know I'm a liability." The woman's lips curved into something that might have been approval. "Smart. I like her already." She extended a hand. "Nyx Ashford, the king's second, and apparently your new worst nightmare." Becca shook her hand cautiously. "Becca Locke. I know who you are. The entire territory knows who you are." Nyx's grip was firm, testing. "The question is, do you know who you need to become?" "Nyx," Zeus warned. "No, she's right." Becca pulled her hand back, meeting Nyx's challenging stare. "I heard what you said. About me needing to be more than..." She faltered, hating how small her voice sounded. more than what I am. Zeus moved to her side instantly, his presence a shield. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Yes, she does, Nyx countered. To them, at least. She gestured vaguely toward the south, toward the Pack territories. Stan Volkov is already spreading rumors that you've been enchanted, that the Omega used dark magic to ensnare you. If she walks into a confrontation unprepared, they'll tear her apart. I won't let that happen, Zeus growled. You can protect her from physical harm, Nyx said, but you can't protect her from politics, from wolves who will test her, look for weakness, for proof that this bond is a mistake. She looked at Becca. If you crumble, his enemies win. I won't. The words left Becca's mouth before she could stop them. Both Zeus and Nyx turned to look at her. Becca's hands trembled, but she fisted them at her sides, forcing herself to stand straight, despite the lingering ache in her ribs. I survived 3 months with Dante thinking I wasn't good enough. Survived Iris trying to break me. Survived a trial designed to execute me. Her voice strengthened. I can survive whatever Stan Volkov throws at me. Nyx's smile widened. There's the fire. Good. You'll need it. She looked at Zeus. 3 weeks. That's how long until the territorial summit. I'll train her myself. Train her for what, exactly? Zeus's voice held an edge of protectiveness that made Becca's heart skip. Everything, Nyx said. Combat basics, pack politics, how to command a room full of wolves without cowering, how to be a queen instead of a victim. The words stung, but Becca knew it was true. She'd been a victim for so long, she'd almost forgotten what else she could be. And if I say no? Becca asked quietly. Then you'll walk into that summit unprepared, and Stan's allies will use you too. Destroy Zeus. Nyx's bluntness was almost refreshing. Your choice. Becca looked at Zeus, searching his face for guidance. But instead of telling her what to do, he simply asked, What do you want, Becca? What did she want? To hide? To let Zeus protect her forever, while whispers of weakness followed them both? Or to stand beside him, truly beside him, as something more than the broken girl he'd saved? I want to learn, Becca said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. I want to be strong enough that when they look at me, they don't see a mistake. They see someone who belongs at your side. Zeus's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The mate bond hummed with approval at the touch. You already belong, he murmured. Then I want them to see it too. Nyx clapped her hands once, decisive. Excellent. We start tomorrow at dawn. Wear something you can move in. She headed for the tent entrance, then paused. Oh, and Becca? The victim routine ends tonight. Tomorrow, you start becoming dangerous. Dawn came with brutality. Nyx didn't ease Becca into training. She threw her into the deep end and watched to see if she'd drown. The training grounds stretched across a clearing in the forest, all packed earth and weapon racks, and a sparring circle that had seen more blood than Becca cared to imagine. Again, Nyx barked, circling Becca like a predator. You're telegraphing your movements. Any wolf worth their fangs will see that punch coming from a mile away. Becca gritted her teeth and reset her stance, sweat already stinging her eyes despite the cool morning air. Her muscles screamed in protest. 3 days of healing had helped, but 3 months of living with Dante, followed by days in a dungeon cell, had left her weak, untrained. I'm trying, she panted. Trying isn't good enough. Nyx moved faster than Becca could track, sweeping her legs out from under her. Becca hit the ground hard, the impact rattling her teeth. In 3 weeks, you'll stand before alphas who've spent centuries perfecting the art of dominance, Nyx said, not even breathing hard. They'll smell your fear. They'll test you. And if you try instead of succeed, Stan's allies will use you to tear Zeus down. Becca pushed herself up, ignoring the sting of scraped palms. Then teach me not to fail. Something gleamed in Nyx's eyes. Respect, maybe. or something better. Good. Now again. This time, pretend I'm Iris. The name hit Becca like a slap, but it also ignited something in her chest. Rage. Months of swallowed anger suddenly boiling to the surface. She reset her stance, and when Nyx came at her again, Becca didn't freeze. She moved, clumsy, untrained, but fierce. Her fist connected with Nyx's raised forearm in a block that sent shockwaves up Becca's arm. Good! Nyx's grin was feral. Channel that. Use it. They trained until Becca's legs gave out, until her lungs burned and her vision blurred. But when Nyx finally called a break, Becca remained standing. You've got potential, Nyx admitted, tossing Becca a water skin. Raw, unfocused, but there's fire under all that fear. Becca drank deeply, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Nyx's expression shifted, something old and painful flickering across her features. Because 10 years ago, I was you, weak, broken, in love with an alpha who rejected me because his pack demanded a stronger mate. Becca's breath caught. What happened? I fell apart, nearly died from the bond breaking. Nyx looked away. Zeus found me in the wildlands, more animal than wolf. He brought me back, gave me purpose when I had nothing. She met Becca's gaze. So when his mate needed training, I volunteered. Consider it paying forward the protection I got. Before Becca could respond, a warrior appeared at the training grounds entrance. Lady Nyx, His Majesty requests your presence. We've received word. From the south. Nyx's expression darkened. Stan? The warrior nodded. Go, Becca said quickly. I'll keep practicing. But Nyx shook her head. No, you're coming with me. Queens don't hide from bad news. They face it. The strategy tent was packed with Zeus's inner circle. Warriors, scouts, and advisors crowded around a map table covered in markers and notes. Zeus stood at the head, his finger tracing a route through the mountains. When he saw Becca, something softened in his eyes, but he didn't smile. This was the king, not the mate. Stan Volkov has made his move, Zeus said without preamble. He's called for a formal challenge at the territorial summit. He's claiming that my exile was never legitimate, that I murdered his body double to fake evidence of my innocence. Murmurs rippled through the tent. That's insane, Nyx said. We have his journal, his financial records, witness testimony from 3 different packs. Which he's claiming are forgeries. Zeus's jaw clenched. He's also claiming that my bond with Becca is a ploy, that I'm using an Omega to gain sympathy and manipulate my way back into power. Becca's stomach dropped. He's making me the weakness. He's trying to, Zeus corrected, his silver eyes finding hers. But only if we let him. What's the challenge? One of the warriors asked. Trial by combat. Zeus's voice was flat. Me versus his champion. Winner takes disputed territory and the right to present evidence to the Elder Council. It's a trap, Nyx said immediately. Stan wouldn't call for combat unless he had an ace. His champion will be enhanced somehow. Silver-laced claws, poisoned weapons, something. I know, Zeus said grimly. But if I refuse, he'll claim I'm afraid, that my exile made me weak. Every alpha who's been waiting for me to show vulnerability will see this as their chance. So we cheat better, Petra, one of the lead warriors, suggested. Fight dirty. Make sure you win. No, Becca's voice cut through the strategy session. Every head turned to look at her. If you cheat, even if you win, they'll use it against you, Becca continued, her heart hammering but her voice steady. They'll say the exiled king is so desperate he had to resort to tricks, that he's not fit to lead. Zeus's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we beat him at his own game. Legally. Publicly. Becca moved to the map table, her mind racing. Stan's using me as a weakness, so let's make me a strength. How? Nyx asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Becca looked at Zeus, at this male who'd risked everything to save her. The mate bond. It's our strongest proof that you're not the monster Stan claims. A true mate bond can't be faked, can't be manipulated. If I stand beside you at the summit, if we show them that connection, they'll have to acknowledge it's real. They'll also make you a target, Zeus said quietly. Stan will come after you, try to break you to get to me. Let him try, Becca said, and meant it. Nyx is training me. In 3 weeks, I won't be the Omega who collapsed at her trial. I'll be the mate of a king, and I'll show them exactly what that means. Silence fell over the tent. Then Zeus smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. All right, he said, we do this together. But Becca, if at any point it becomes too much, you tell me. You don't have to prove anything. Yes, I do, Becca countered. I have to prove it to myself. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of training, strategy sessions, and slowly building confidence. Nyx was relentless. Every morning at dawn, Becca found herself in the training circle, learning to fight, to read body language, to project confidence even when her knees shook. Wolves respect strength, Nyx explained during one particularly brutal session. Not physical strength necessarily, but the strength to stand your ground, to look an alpha in the eye and not flinch. Becca practiced on Zeus's warriors, on scouts who'd seen battle, on Nyx herself, who showed no mercy. And slowly, impossibly, she improved. Her movements became sharper, her instincts quicker. The fear that had lived in her chest for 3 months began to transform into something else. Anger, determination, power. The mate bond with Zeus strengthened too. Every evening, they'd sit by the fire, and he'd tell her stories about his rule before the exile, about the territories he'd unified, the wars he'd ended, the peace he'd built. I was arrogant, Zeus admitted one night, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the flames dance. I thought my power made me untouchable. Stan proved me wrong. What will you do when you clear your name? Becca asked. Reclaim what's mine. Rebuild what was destroyed. He looked down at her. With you beside me, if you'll have me. Becca's heart swelled. I'm not going anywhere. His lips found hers then, gentle at first, then deeper, the mate bond singing between them with approval. When they finally pulled apart, Becca whispered, I'm still scared. About the summit. About facing Dante and Iris again. Good, Zeus murmured against her hair. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it control you. The territorial summit was held in neutral ground, a massive stone amphitheater built into the side of a mountain, ancient and imposing. Becca stood at Zeus's side as they entered, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, wearing leather armor Nyx had commissioned. No flowing dresses, no symbols of weakness. She looked like a warrior, felt like one too. The amphitheater held over 1,000 wolves, alphas from every pack in the territories, their betas and advisors, witnesses and challengers. And there, in the section reserved for the Silverpine pack, sat Dante and Iris. Dante looked haggard, thinner than Becca remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, genuine pain flashed across his face. Iris, on the other hand, looked furious. She wore silver, chains, a prisoner awaiting trial, but her eyes burned with hatred as they locked onto Becca. Ignore them, Zeus murmured. Eyes forward. They took their place in the challenger's circle. Across from them stood Stan Volkov. He was massive, even for a wolf. 7 feet of muscle and scars, with eyes like black ice and a smile that promised violence. Zeus Thorn, Stan's voice boomed across the amphitheater. The exiled king returns. How desperate you must be to risk everything for an Omega's honor. Careful, Stan, Zeus said mildly. That Omega is my mate. Insult her again, and this challenge becomes personal. Stan laughed. Oh, it's already personal. You've spent 5 years hiding in the borderlands while I've built an empire from the ashes of your failure. Now you come crawling back with forged evidence and a convenient mate bond? He spat. The elders see through your tricks. Then let the evidence speak for itself, Zeus said calmly. He nodded to Nyx, who stepped forward with Stan's journal. This is Stan Volkov's personal journal, Nyx announced, detailing his plan to fake his death, frame Zeus for murder, and seize control of the Northern Territories. We have financial records showing payments to false witnesses. We have testimony from 3 packs whose alphas were bribed or threatened into supporting the exile. Stan's smile never wavered. Forgeries, all of it, created by a desperate male who can't accept that he was beaten fairly. Then explain this, Zeus said, and pulled out a second item, a silver medallion inscribed with the Volkov family crest. Stan's confidence flickered, just for a moment. This medallion, Zeus continued, was found in the Western Territories, in the home of a male named Marcus Gray. A male who happens to match your exact description, Stan. A male who's been living off stolen wealth for 5 years. The amphitheater erupted in whispers. Circumstantial, Stan growled. Is it? Zeus's smile was cold. Then you won't. Mind if the elders send a team to verify Marcus Gray's identity? A simple DNA test would clear this up immediately. Stan's face darkened. You have no authority to demand such a thing. Actually, a new voice rang out, he does. Every head turned as 3 figures descended from the elders' platform. Ancient wolves, their eyes glowing with centuries of power. This council has reviewed the evidence presented by Zeus Thorn, the lead elder announced. While we cannot overturn the original exile without further investigation, we can authorize a DNA test to verify the identity of Marcus Gray. Stan's hands clenched into fists. This is a farce. This is justice, the elder corrected. However, the matter of the mate bond remains. Stan Volkov has challenged its legitimacy. Zeus Thorn, you claim Becca Locke as your true mate. Can you prove this bond before the assembly? Zeus looked at Becca, a question in his silver eyes. She nodded. Together, they stepped into the center of the amphitheater. The mate bond, Zeus said, his voice carrying to every corner, is sacred. It cannot be faked, cannot be forced. It simply is. He took Becca's hand, and the moment their skin touched, the bond flared to life. Golden light erupted from their joined hands, spreading up their arms in patterns like lightning. The bond made visible, undeniable, blazing between them, with a power that made every wolf in the amphitheater feel it in their bones. Becca gasped as the full force of the connection washed over her. Not just affection or attraction, but something deeper, soul deep. A recognition that went beyond flesh and blood. This was her mate, her equal, her home. The light intensified, filling the amphitheater until wolves had to shield their eyes. When it finally faded, Becca and Zeus stood at the center, their hands still joined, the bond between them humming with undeniable truth. Silence fell. Then, slowly, wolves began to bow. First 1, then 10, then hundreds, acknowledging the bond, acknowledging the truth. Even Dante stood, his face carved with regret, and bowed his head to the mate he'd rejected. Only Stan remained standing, his face purple with rage. This proves nothing, he roared. A light show means nothing. It means everything, the lead elder said quietly. A bond of that magnitude cannot be fabricated. Zeus Thorn has proven his claim. He turned to Stan. And you, Stan Volkov, will submit to the DNA test. If you are who you claim to be, you have nothing to fear. Stan's eyes darted around the amphitheater, looking for allies, for escape routes. He found neither. Seize him, the elder commanded. Guards moved in, but Stan was faster. He shifted mid-step, his wolf form bursting free, a massive black beast with silver-streaked fur. He lunged not at Zeus, but at Becca. "No!" Zeus's roar shook the amphitheater as he threw himself between them. But Becca didn't freeze. Nyx's training took over. She ducked under Stan's leap, rolled to the side, and came up with a blade she'd hidden in her boot. When Stan landed and turned for another attack, Becca was ready. She didn't try to fight him, didn't try to kill him. She simply held her ground, blade raised, eyes locked on his with absolute defiance. "Come on," she said quietly. "Let's see if an Omega is really as weak as you think." For a heartbeat, Stan hesitated. In that hesitation, Zeus's wolf form tackled him from the side, massive jaws closing around Stan's throat in a dominance hold that forced submission. The fight was over in seconds. Stan shifted back to human form, gasping, defeated. "The challenge is decided," the lead elder announced. "Zeus Thorn has proven his mate bond is true. Stan Volkov will submit to investigation. This summit is adjourned." As guards hauled Stan away, Zeus shifted back and pulled Becca into his arms. "That was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've ever seen," he murmured. "Both," Becca admitted, her legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Definitely both." "I thought I'd lost you," Zeus said fiercely. "When he lunged, but you didn't." Becca cupped his face. "We did this together, like we promised." Zeus kissed her then, deep and claiming, in front of the entire assembly. When they finally pulled apart, the amphitheater erupted in cheers. 3 months later, Becca stood in the same amphitheater, but this time for a different ceremony. Zeus's exile had been formally lifted. Stan Volkov's crimes had been exposed. He was indeed alive, living under a false identity, and had orchestrated the entire frame job. Iris had been tried and convicted of conspiracy, false testimony, and assault. She'd been sentenced to 5 years of pack service, stripped of her family name and status. Dante had stepped down as alpha of Silverpine Pack, unable to live with the guilt of what he'd almost done. He'd approached Becca once, before he left the territories, to apologize. "I should have believed you," he'd said, his voice hollow. "Should have fought for you. I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Becca had looked at the male she'd once loved and felt nothing. No anger, no lingering affection, just pity. "I hope you find peace," she'd said, "but find it far from here." He'd nodded and left, a broken wolf carrying the weight of his choices. Now, Becca stood before the assembled packs wearing a gown the color of midnight and silver, as Zeus placed a crown on her head. "You came to us broken," Zeus said, his voice carrying across the amphitheater. "You came as a victim, bleeding and accused by wolves who saw only what they wanted to see." He paused, his silver eyes finding hers. "But you showed us something we'd forgotten. That strength isn't about bloodlines or pack status. It's about standing up when the world tells you to kneel. It's about fighting for truth even when the lie is prettier." Tears pricked Becca's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "You are my mate," Zeus continued, "my queen. And anyone who doubts your right to stand beside me can take it up with me personally." The amphitheater erupted in cheers. Not polite applause, but genuine celebration. These wolves had seen her face Stan Volkov without flinching, had watched her train from victim to warrior in 3 short weeks. They believed now. They'd earned their respect. After the ceremony, Nyx found Becca in the corridor. "I told you," Nyx said with a rare smile. "You just needed to remember you were dangerous." "I had a good teacher," Becca replied. That night, Becca stood on the balcony of Zeus's reclaimed palace, overlooking the territories that were now theirs to protect. Zeus wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Any of it?" Becca thought about the trial, the rejection, the 3 months of doubt and pain that had led her to this moment. "No," she said finally. Because all of it led me here. To you. To myself. She turned in his arms. I was rejected and bleeding, barely able to stand. But you caught me. I'll always catch you, Zeus promised. I know, Becca smiled. But I can stand on my own now, too. And when she kissed him, she felt whole, complete. Not because she'd found someone to save her, but because she'd learned to save herself. The girl who'd fainted before the packed court had died that day. The queen who rose in her place would never fall again. And that's it, beautiful souls. Becca's journey from broken to whole, from victim to queen, from rejected and bleeding to powerful enough to rule beside a king. If this story touched you, if Becca's transformation inspired you, if you felt every emotion right alongside her, drop a comment below. Tell me your favorite moment. Tell me what part made you want to stand up and cheer. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button because we've got so many more stories coming your way. Stories of wolves and mates and women who refuse to. Stay broken. Until next time, stay strong, stay fierce, and remember, you're never too broken to rise.